what are some misconceptions and how do they lead to prejudices against this population? And I'm going to start this off with Richard.
Well, I think a lot of the misconceptions have to do with this view of a monolithic Asian community, personality, culture. And if you are Asian or Asian American, you know that's just absolutely not true. For instance, there are multiple houses of worship in Austin for different communities. Recently there have been large Hindu temples going up in Austin. There are mosques that are here. There are Christian churches. There are lots of different cultures that are just thriving, but people tend to lump Asian Americans into one group, particularly when looking at us through an economic lens or in terms of education, all high achieving, high dollar earning. And that's a real detriment to the many members of our communities who may be refugees, who have a lower standard of income here and who are struggling to make it, and compound that with language barriers they may have, and that prevents them from getting access, because this perception that everything is going so well for the Asian living in Austin prevents us from really looking at the details and seeing that there are families that just don't have access to health care or help with education for their children, so on so many fronts. And I know we'll discuss that a lot more as we go forward.
Right.
And there's just multiple barriers to access. I think for us, it's just really an issue of access to services, whether in any sphere, whether it's within the economic world or social services or in healthcare. We have just seen so many barriers. And a lot of times when we live under this model minority myth that everything is okay, we forget. And to an extent, the community itself does internalize that myth. And
Tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I would say that, I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure when you have been tagged as the model minority, as a community that's got it all together. But when we have issues of mental health that are not being addressed, when we have high rates of poverty, kids are not graduating from high school at the rates that we think they are, those things get swept under the rug. And so sometimes when we're tagged with a certain expectation, we try to live up to it. And we may not talk about those problems that we see in our communities. And that turns into a problem where, government entities or those powers to be, when it comes to resources, so those resources may not go to some of these underserved communities.